got to make whatever he wants and take it with his own hands. Poor people stay poor people and they never get to see. Someone's got to win in the human race. If it isn't you, then it has to be me. So smile while you're making it. Laugh while you're taking it. Even though you're faking it, nobody's gonna know. Nobody's gonna know.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Hello, welcome to DiEM25's Another Now, the program that came to us as an idea as a result of a very silly, mindless virus that put capitalism on hold, something that not even the Second World War, as I keep saying, managed to do. A virus that has locked us up for a very long time. We're almost out now, at least in some countries. But nevertheless, this feeling of isolation that, in the end, that politics is not like a football match or a football league where teams go up and down depending on goals that they score, but politics is about the capacity of government to do things like, to tell you not to leave your house or to, stop football or to, just nationalize almost everything. All of a sudden, things that the neoliberals were telling us that are impossible, suddenly they demanded that they should happen. If this is not a brilliant opportunity, a fantastic time to rethink our now, our present, and to try to imagine another now, because, I don't know about you, but me personally, I believe that I'm speaking on behalf of all DiEMers, all members of the Democracy in Europe movement. The greatest nightmare will be that we go back to normality, because the normality we had before this was pretty appalling, pretty awful. If you think that 60% of Europeans, they were one payday away from ruin. One payday lost ruin, 60% of Europeans. So, do we really want to go back to that, to a browning planet, to the kind of inequalities and exploitation that we used to consider, or many were asking us to consider as normality? We want to imagine another now, and this is what we're doing here. We have, I'm incredibly privileged because I have all these guests that, it's a dream come true to spend an hour with them every week. Without further ado, let me go to tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is a brilliant actor. She comes from Italy. She is in Italy. Her name is Valeria Golino, the Valeria Golino. Valeria, where are we finding you? In which part of the world are you cooped up?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Brilliantly.
Yes. Good.
Yes.
Good. Because
and we can see you and you look splendid.
Thank you. I was worried that the sound of the sea would be bothering, but it's not. The sound is okay for you guys. You can hear me.
It's a beautiful soundtrack.
Yes.
Actually, beautiful soundtrack.
It's the soundtrack that I dreamt of for months when I was in my apartment in Rome, where I live, and for many weeks, as everybody. All I could think, all my ambitions, all my desires were, when will I be able to go back to the sea? Yeah. Not when I will be able to work, which is also an issue, of course. Definitely for me and for everybody else. But when you are isolated and in lockdown, sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's anxious driven days, sometimes it's worrying, and sometimes you feel totally elated because you don't even have a brain anymore, because you are like in a sense of you don't have any responsibilities anymore, you don't have to perform anymore. And I don't mean perform for me as an actress, I mean perform for everybody, And so I was always thinking, as soon as they let us, I will go to the sea. And that's what I did. because the lockdown in Italy just finished.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you know, we're not back to normality. We're not. And we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be. But I decided to spend another month in almost lockdown, but at least with
the soundtrack of the sea surrounding you and the beautiful waves. Before we go into what really I want to get into tonight, which is movies, because I'm a film buff. One of the things I failed at is, I failed at being a musician, I failed at being a film director, I failed at a variety of things, and I am this intersection of many failures, which make me who I am. Before we go into film, I want to tell our audience tonight that we have three things in common. I think you know the one thing that I'm going to mention, and that's Paleophalliro, because this is the suburb of Athens where I grew up and where I believe your mum lives.
Of course.
So we are Phalliriotes.
Partly I grew up there as well, partly. Not only in Paleophalliro, not only in Paleophalliro. There were other neighbors, but yes. And that's where I come when I come to Greece to see my mom, definitely.
There you are. So this is one thing. But there are another two things that we have in common. And I'm talking about things from our childhood. The other is scoliosis, which I believe you suffer from. I've got a chronic scoliosis, from childhood. And this is something I've got to admit that I read somewhere about you, which I didn't know. You have a grandmother from Egypt with a French connection?
Yes, my grandmother was a Greek Egyptian, like many others.
Right. So was mine.
And my grandfather was an Egyptian, a Coptic Egyptian.
Yeah.
And there was French also in his genealogy. Yeah.
Well, French was the language in Cairo, in Alexandria. Where was your grandmother, in Alexandria or Cairo?
Alexandria.
Well, mine was in Cairo. But French was the lingua franca. I mean, there was all these communities, Italians, Greeks, Jews, and they all spoke French with one another. Even the English spoke French with them.
Of course.
And the English were dominant back then. So there you are. We have these three things. Egypt, scoliosis, and Paleophalliro.
That's a lot. That's very kind of intimate and profound things, like, scoliosis, whatever. It's something that you bring in with you for the rest of your life in a way, and origins and neighbors. So we have three very,
there you are,
important things, and we have a fourth thing.
Okay.
Which is maybe not as important to you, but I did play your wife. I was your wife, your virtual wife. I pretended.
You were. But you were not actually my wife. You were Varoufakis' wife.
I was Varoufakis' wife.
And you were not Danae, because the way that Costa-Gavras wrote the role of Danae, I have to say that, didn't bear much of a resemblance with Danae. And you put a lot of meat into that role, even though it was a short role.
I did meet Danae before starting the movie, and that's a movie in itself. Danae, it's a movie.
I know. So, I watch it 24 hours a day.
I'm sure, and I'm sure you're very entertained because she is something else. Of course, I had a very small role. I would have participated to the movie one way or another because of what the contents of the movie were, and also because of Gavras, who I've always wanted to work with. So, and that gave me also the opportunity to meet you and to meet your wife, and so that's also something in common, though, because I had to come somehow and steal little things that nobody knows, just me. Actors.
We know. Danae and I know, because we've seen it on screen. We've seen your input, I have to say it was pretty heroic input, especially in a few scenes, especially in the scene of the restaurant. But anyway, this is for people who watch
Yeah, this is between us, because I mean, if somebody sees the movie, you will you know what we're talking about. So yes, without knowing each other since we've known each other for 2 years, but we had a lot of like common rivers.
So, Paleophallero, Egypt, and scoliosis. That's not bad.
Scoliosis.
It's not bad. It's a nice.
Probably when I see you, you would never think that you had that problem as a child.
I am very good at faking things.
Me too. I mean, I was so good at faking that when I was an adolescent with scoliosis in Greece, in Athens, and I for a couple of years, I had to wear this, it's a cast. It's a brace, like, which was made, probably you remember, out of steel.
Yeah. Medieval, Middle Ages.
Very medieval, yes. And, when you are 12, 13, all you can think is how I'm going to hide this medieval, and I was, I guess, an actress already in my head, and I was hiding it. I was pretending I didn't wear it.
Yeah. But hang on a second. Valeria, before you became an actor, you were a model, right? And you were a model of all places in Greece.
Yes, I started
in the 1970s.
No, 70s, no, please.
When
in the 1970s, I was like 5, 6, 10. In the 80s.
Oh, sorry.
In the 80s.
I keep judging things by my
maybe by my appearance.
Hang on a second.
I'm not that old.
It was in 1979 when you did your first modeling job, I read.
30, yes. When I was 13.
1970s.
I was 13 years old.
Right.
Right. Well, it's the 70s, I guess.
You started very early.
My very, brief career as a model, it was, between 1980 and 1983. That was 1979 to 1983.
That was the time when I had already escaped Greece for Britain, or landed in Britain, or was imprisoned in Britain, however you want to.
Imprisoned?
Well, Britain was a cell back then. It was the beginning of Thatcherism in a very bleak and nasty place, which of course was enjoyable at the same time. My father spent 4 years in a concentration camp in Macronissos, and he reminisces.
Oh, wow.
But he reminisces of it, he thinks fondly of it in the same way that people think fondly of the war, right?
Of course.
So, I can think fondly of Britain. I'm allowed.
Think fondly even of this coronavirus lockdown.
We certainly will.
We already are. We already are.
And let's face it, we are privileged because we have an army of people out there who are working so that we can be isolated.
Of course.
We are the aristocracy of coronavirus.
Risking, and everything else. It's.
But tell me about that experience, because the early 80s was the beginning of the lifestyle explosion in Greece. That awful period of kitsch and the ideology of the spectacle. How did you experience it as a young girl, being a model in a very chauvinistic, patriarchal country back then, Greece?
That's a very interesting question. I was I was 14, 15, 16. So I guess I wasn't even myself yet. I was, the beginning of myself. And, but at the same time, I had lived in Greece and in the south of Italy because my father is from Naples, and I was born in Naples. So chauvinistic, I was used to,
Greece, Napoli, same thing.
It's all part of the same material, of the same cultural baggage. And so I was quite, and I still am probably, and that doesn't mean that I am right, quite tolerant. Because women, even if my mother was a modern woman, my grandmother, very cosmopolitic, as we said, it was from Alexandria. you know, she came from a period where there was a lot of mixing cultures, and so nobody in my family was dictating some kind of like, you know, obedience.
No, but that world, though, when you know the lecherous males, you know,
Yeah,
in the modeling world. This is, I wasn't talking about your own background, but you know, this is an industry which was
yeah,
being set up at the time.
of course, of course. No,
Maybe,
but
however, the 1980s was, early 80s, come to think of it, was a more innocent time in Greece. It was the 90s, which was
the
pretty nasty.
90s was definitely like
Pretty
it
nasty.
took like another thing, you know.
Yeah,
But the 80s, innocent, and at the same time, kind of like very, there were a lot of people from other countries, you know, models from other countries. There was a kind of like, you know, a lot of enthusiasm about
of course.
being able to, you know, to do that kind of thing. Um, I would be lying if I was sometimes in situations where if I think of them right now,
It would be a Me
I,
Too moment, right?
I would be, yes, a Me Too thing. It would be a Me Too moment, but not only in Greece.
Of course.
You know, that's what I'm trying to say is that whatever the atmosphere of chauvinism and of like a little bit of abuse of power that I had to kind of like escape each time, I didn't only experience it in Greece. I
Right. Of course.
experienced it in
Well,
Italy,
the
I
Me Too
experienced
movement is
it
not a
in
Greek movement.
America.
Of course,
Uh,
Hollywood.
you know, some cases are very well known. I experienced it in France. You have also, I also think that culturally it was a moment where values were a little bit different than now. What I'm trying to say is it was worse and better.
Hmm.
It was worse and better.
Yeah, of
Right.
course. I understand that
You know
entirely.
what I'm trying to say? I mean,
Yeah,
things that
entirely.
now we look at and say, oh my God, how could this ever happen? You know, then there was a different way to look. I mean, people were behaving with the values that they were, they were, come dire, a heritage.
Sure.
And they were not as, they were in the 70s before and the 60s. So there was a little bit of more of a, when I say free, I don't mean better or worse, but
No, no, no. I understand what you're saying because 1983 was the time when the new socialist government then, that was quite radical, the
of
first government,
course,
introduced the new family law. And the family law that went through parliament in 1983 in Greece was the most progressive family law in Europe.
really,
So we went from the Middle Ages
to
to,
boom,
to more than Sweden in terms of the actual letter of the law, not the practice of the law, of course,
not
right?
the
Letter of
practice,
it.
but
But of
yes,
course, that all meant. But 1983 was also the time when you made your first movies, did
movie. Mm.
with Wertmüller. How
Yes,
did you
there
end
was
up on the set of Lena
Lena Muller, which at the time she was an extremely, you know, powerful. I mean, powerful in the collective imaginary, because in the 70s, you know, there were, she made a lot of incredibly interesting movies.
Of course, I
And
remember working with them in a
uh,
couple of cinemas in Athens. Two cinemas played them only.
it was, she, you know, she was like a woman. She was a woman. She was extremely like, of course, like left wing,
Mhm.
very, very like spregiudicata. I'm trying to remember what do I mean spregiudicata. I mean like, you know, like with a very, very forward way of thinking. Um, very tough.
So how did you get up that part from, you know, from a model, suddenly you are in a Lina Wertmüller. I mean, this is, you know, the gap that most young people want you to fill
Yeah,
in because, you know, so many young actors, male, female, doesn't matter what, who want to make that cut, the cut.
of course.
You think, okay, so how did Valeria do it?
You know, mine is not necessarily a good example or the thing to do, because I was, let me say, lucky. I was really lucky. That doesn't mean that every time happens, because luck has to do, timing
Of
has to
course.
do. It was all, you know, um, a lot of actors that I know started a little bit later, did extremely good schools, became very, very solid actors. And, you know, and at 19, 20, they start working. I start working at 16 because of circumstances. That doesn't mean it could have been different and I could have been nowhere. So
Sure.
I am grateful that I was spared of all the, you know, the trying and the trying and the trying, because that is not necessarily good, you know.
No, and there's no guarantee that you can go to the best drama school and end up in a
And you
soap
can,
in a soap thing.
of
Um,
course, of course. So I'm going to be very, I don't want to be tedious and tell you like long, very fast. I was already a model and I was going to school in Greece, in Athens. I was living
okay,
with,
where? Tell our Greek listeners that.
the school is the Italian school. There is one
Okay.
Italian school,
Yes, we know it.
which is like both Italians and Greeks. But it was the only Italian school at the time, I think still.
Yeah.
And I was, because I was living with my mom, I went back for Easter to see my dad. And I stopped in Rome and I had lunch with my uncle and my aunt. And I was 16. And I was already a model, but I was still thinking of going to university. I wanted to be clear. That was not my dream. In my head, I was modeling because I was, you know, young and vain. But my idea was like, after school, I'm going to go to university. I'm going to become this and that.
Yeah, the standard canon.
I was not planning to be an actress. But then, whatever. I was in Rome having lunch with my uncle and my aunt, and Lina Wertmüller, who is a very good friend of my aunt, called during lunch and was talking to my aunt about this movie that she was going to make with Ugo Tognazzi. Remember Ugo Tognazzi?
How can I forget Ugo Tognazzi?
Great genius actor, great genius actor, which in my family we all loved. And so, and I was leaving to go to the airport to come back to Athens, and my aunt came to her terrace and screamed at me from her terrace. I said, Valeria, I was already in the car. Come back, come back. And basically what she did, it was like, she was talking with Lina, and Lina said, I'm looking for a young girl to be the daughter of Ugo Tognazzi, but I cannot find her. And my aunt said, oh, you don't know, I have my little, you know, niece. She's so beautiful and she's 16 and she's a model, blah, 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 blah. So they sent me there, and that was the beginning of it. I met Lina, and that was it.
So, speaking about Italian cinema, because you know you come from a country, or half of you comes from a country with a remarkable tradition. I remember when we were young, in the 70s. When I was young in the 70s, in the early 70s, you were young in the late 70s.
Yeah, right.
Be clear on that.
You're younger than me, I think.
No, I'm not.
I think
No,
you look.
No, I'm not. I can assure you, I am.
Thank God.
Yeah,
Thank God.
I remember that, you know, those of us who were film buffs and who would not miss a single movie, whether it was, you know, Italian or Japanese or something that was coming to Athens, we were in factions. And you know, there were those who were Fellini fans, and they were the Michelangelo Antonioni people.
Antonioni fans, yeah.
They were the Taviani brothers people.
Of course.
You know, they were different. So who were your influences in terms of directors? When, you know, just before you went to Italy to do your first movie?
I have to say that my family as well was movie buffs. So my mom, and that I can always thank her for that, took us to the movies in Greece 2-3 times a week.
Yeah.
Me and my brother. And we would go to see from like the Greek comedy to, you know, Fellini, to going through like Robert De Niro movies with Scorsese, Sidney Lumet movies. And then there was a Fotopoulos movie, you know, a movie with Fotopoulos or with Kostas Boutsas. And then there was Ugo Tognazzi and Marcello Mastroianni, and there were all those directors, incredible Italian directors. There was Gianfranco Rosi, there was Elio Petri, all those, you know. So,
but who got to you there? Which movie got to you there?
You know, when you are a child, you have a taste. The more you grow up, your taste changes.
Sure,
you
but
know?
back
then, I would say from the Italians, I was a very Bertolucci fan, very big Bertolucci fan.
Early Bertolucci or later Bertolucci? Novecento, much before that?
No, before and after, with sometimes going like, what? You know, Bernardo did some incredible, eventually then I met him. You know, I was a fan much before meeting him. And I am right now in his house. This is the house where I am.
This is a revelation.
For movie buffs, I don't say it generally, but for movie buffs right now.
Well,
here
I start trembling at the thought that you are in Bertolucci's house.
I am in the beach house of Bernardo.
Even though he was not my favorite.
But he was still an amazing artist.
The earlier, the 1950s stuff was.
Yeah, like La Comare Secca, and then, well, I mean, 50s, I don't know, 60s.
His first movies were in the 50s, some black and white, very slow, very.
La Comare Secca, one probably, when he was really young. Yeah. But anyway, I'm in this house where I have all year long now, but it's still his house. He shot a movie of his, which was La Luna, the moon.
Really? The moon was in the La Luna home. I loved La Luna. Now you reminded me. I really love that movie.
This is the house where he shot this movie. And also he edited the Last Emperor in this house, and Little Buddha. So you can imagine, for a movie buff like us, this is full of. It's full of. I evoke him constantly. So anyway, but the more I grew up, I have to say that as much as Antonioni was an amazing master, I am more prone to Fellini.
There you are. I've got something else in common.
I mean, I really react to Fellini in a visceral and cerebral way, while to Antonioni more cerebral.
Exactly. Antonioni
is from here up. Fellini has also the rest of it, you know.
He plays games with your mind.
It's impossible to watch, to watch his masterpieces, even when you see them on TV, still now, you go, okay, I'll watch 5 minutes.
And then you get stuck.
And then you're stuck.
Do you remember that tiny little movie that wasn't really very well known, Clowns?
Of course. I haven't seen it in a long.
I remember, it was almost next to no story to it, but it was such an emotional experience. Well, looking at, can I tell you, I remember you. I mean, first time I watched you was mid-80s, 86, 87. There was an Italian movie where you were, I think you were a cleaner, and you were having an affair with two different people.
Storia d'amore.
That's the one. That's the first time I watched you.
Well, that's a good time to watch.
Watching you in London at the British Film Institute. And then after that, I caught a glimpse of you in a movie which I didn't like. But I'm sure you liked it because it was quite a success story for you, Rainman.
Shall I say?
And I didn't like it because of Tom Cruise. I can't like a movie with Tom Cruise. It is impossible.
But that's because you have a prejudice. You are very ideological, and you bring it there, and it's fine. But
it wasn't a bad movie because Barry Levinson is great, but he should not have cast Tom Cruise.
I think Tom Cruise was very good in the movie.
He's always very good.
Very, very good. Okay, that's another story.
That's what's annoying. He's like a robot. He's perfect.
Exactly, he was perfect.
He's perfect, but he doesn't evoke any kind of emotion.
He's there are actors like that. There is all kind of actors, and the fact is, the fact is that even if he's not our kind of actor, that doesn't mean that the guy doesn't have a gift.
Of course he
Because
does.
he
But
has a
that,
gift of watchability. You wanted to look at him.
I know,
And
and
that's
that's
like
what
a movie
upsets me.
star.
And that's what upsets me. That
I know, I
I,
understand.
I couldn't watch Dustin Hoffman enough, and I couldn't watch you enough, and I couldn't watch Barry Levinson at work enough. Anyway, look, this is my problem.
But
Not
anyway, to go back to that movie, the movie
okay.
that you said before, the Storia d'Amore, that was my, very pivotal for my career, because I was 19, and it's an amazing director, Francesco Maselli, and it was a very,
Okay.
very,
That was him.
very, very, you know, talking about ideological, very ideological movie, to me, in the best sense of the word, because there is not only bad ideology. Sometimes ideology, now we take ideology as a bad word, you know.
Not for
It's
me.
not only,
Ideology, you can't escape ideology.
yeah,
Same way fish cannot escape water, we cannot escape ideology. We have an ideology. Especially, the worst one is the one that starts by saying that you don't have an ideology. That's the worst ideology to have, as far as I'm concerned.
you're right. That movie was ideological and very lyrical at the same time, very, very vital. And that gave me my first Coppa Volpi, which is like the Golden Lion for actors
In
in,
Venice.
in Venice,
Right.
which, when you win it at 19 years old, even for, it gives you a sense of pride, it gives you a sense of like belonging, of like, it's one of those things that happen when, if it happens early, you go like, okay, I'm there, I am.
Is it a good thing for it to happen early, or should it have happened at 29 instead of 19?
Well, it happened again 3 years ago. I won.
I know.
Very, very modest. The lady is very modest. No, because I won two. I am one of the 3 actresses in the world that have won 2 Coppa Volpi. And the other ones are Shirley MacLaine
Okay.
and Isabelle Huppert.
Isabelle Huppert.
So my
Well,
brother,
that's not a bad company to be in.
really,
For them
in
to be in
all
your
those years,
company. For them to be in your company, I meant.
thanks. No,
Ah,
I am so like those. There are 2 great actresses. But the thing is that, as far as your question of winning an important prize or doing something important when you're young, you said, was it okay to be young, or you think it should have come later? I think it should come early. I think if it happens early, you're
Gives you
lucky.
a
You're
solid
lucky.
foundation.
I think we shouldn't think of anything that comes good to us as something that necessarily we have to sweat for it. In the sense, I don't think
I
that's
agree.
very Catholic in a way, It's like you have to pay and you have to give. I think that if circumstances, destiny, whatever, gives you something young and you're not totally idiotic, because of course, if you start saying, oh, I'm such a good that's stupid.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you take it as something like, okay, this is something I should follow, I should be
It gives
careful,
you confidence on which to
give
build
you a certain
the
confidence. Yes, yes.
next career. Well, and that's when. So you went to Hollywood after that. It was very shortly after that that
Yeah. A
you
year later, I went to Hollywood. Yeah.
did a couple of movies there, and Rainman was the one that became most coveted. How was that?
It was hard.
Mm.
It was hard. It was hard for me, in the sense that I learned a lot during that shooting, because I was very undisciplined. I was very probably pretentious. Without knowing it, I was very thinking that everything is for granted. I started 3 years earlier. Everything was going well. My little face and my voice took me places, and so I was like, yeah, I thought everything was for me. And while I was doing this movie, which was my second movie in America, I realized that it's not only, you can not only live by the little gifts that you have. During that movie, even Tom Cruise, definitely Dustin Hoffman, which for me, he was an idol, as
Me too. Me too.
Barry Levinson, the way they worked, the way they worked. I mean, they worked and worked and worked and went for it and discipline. I was smoking joints before going to shoot. I was 21, I was smoking a little joint. I was like, okay, whatever. And then after a couple of weeks, I realized that this was not it.
Yeah.
That I had to be serious, that I had to remember my lines, that I had to make choices. And Barry Levinson came every morning, looked at me and said, discipline. I had never been in school for acting. I thought, I just can get through with this. I can get away with this. So that movie was a moment of, there is moments in your life where you realize things about yourself.
Sure.
Where people tell you one little thing that you will remember. And so that was one of those movies.
Can I ask you about that very movie? You mentioned Dustin Hoffman being your idol. He's an actor that I appreciate enormously myself. I love that man as an actor. How was it to meet an idol and to play alongside him?
Yeah, it was all very, very, all that was extremely natural and joyful. And I didn't have the American dream. I loved individually these people, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, as I said before, Scorsese, that was coming from the 70s. So I was extremely honored and happy, but I was not like, oh my God, I have to make it here.
Yeah.
So my relationships with these people was natural. It was like, and Dustin was so extremely smart and tricky. He could take, and I was 21. So he would take me in conversations like where he would set little traps for me to fall in, and I would fall in them and come out again. And I think, when you have the opportunity as a young person to work with people that they are better than you, with more experience than you, that they are like real talented people, this is like, all I think most of my great experiences came from working with people that I looked up to. Like when I worked with Sean Penn, in his first movie as a director. Again,
Which
he
one
was
was that? Again, remind me, because that one I've
Sean
missed.
Penn. In 2000, sorry, no, not in 2000, in 1990, not 2000, I apologize.
Anyway, what was the name of it?
1991 or 1992, I did the first movie that Sean Penn directed.
Which was?
That was called Indian Runner.
You were in that. I remember that, but I don't remember you because,
Oh, that's nice.
I'm getting old. That's why. I remember you in other movies, though, Valeria.
Thank God. Thank you. Well, I did his first movie as a director, and he was 30 years old. I was 24. And he was, an incredible actor, starting his new thing as a director.
And a very good director as well.
Very good director. And he taught me a lot. And there was Viggo Mortensen and Patricia Arquette and Charles Bronson. I mean, for me, I came from Naples. I was like, there was these people that they were like, strange encounters, but extremely interesting. And, Sean became a friend that now, after 30 years, because it was 30 years ago, we're still during the quarantine going like, what's up? What are you doing? So those years, were very, very formative. Formative, can you say?
Oh, absolutely.
For me,
Spot on. Formative.
formative.
Can I now take you to what was a pivotal moment for me? Respiro. I've told you that before. You've been warned. Last year when we met, when was it? A year ago or 2 years? I told you that Respiro was one of my favorite all-time movies. I don't know how you felt about it, but for me it was a true revelation. It was a movie that you made in Lampedusa. I don't know how many people have seen it. Did it
Lot,
do well at the box
lot.
office? Lots. That's fantastic.
Thank
Because,
God.
as I
Thank
said,
God.
it's one, and I'm not saying it because you were in it and because I'm speaking to you. I've been saying this to, it's one of my top 20 movies ever, and that's very difficult to put 20 movies, together as part. But can you talk about it, and then I'll talk about it a little bit too because it's so important to me.
I tell you, when I saw Respiro the first time, after I did it, and after, we had this incredible experience in Lampedusa for a long time because we went there much before start shooting with the director and some other. There were not other actors in it. I was the only actress, professional actress. Everybody else was from there. Besides my husband, who was he's a painter. But anyway, I was the only actress, and it was an amazing experience. It was a moment of grace. There are moments like that. But I still didn't know, because I was so involved with the movie, of the result. I had no idea what was going to be, the cinema is the director's mean. I mean, really, a director can make a movie much worse or much, much better. So I was there, I was giving everything I could, my soul, my, everything an actor can give when they believe in a project. But I had no idea until I saw it of the beauty, And I am very, very critical of what I do. And usually I come out of seeing my movies always a little bit, okay, whatever. And when I saw Respiro, I smiled. I was like, this is such a perfect movie.
It is a perfect movie because it's usually when cinema people, crews, directors, writers, descend upon a place like Lampedusa back then, a backward place, a community that is stuck with its premonitions, its superstitions, its feudal relations, the nastiness that is part and parcel of villages. What they do is they are condescending. They look down upon those people. And this movie is remarkable for me because it manages to capture, on one hand, all those awful superstitions, and at the same time, the extreme beauty and humanity of it.
Absolutely.
And I have to say that your performance was superlative because it was so easy to get it wrong. So easy to get it wrong because you're playing a woman who could be thought of as manic depressive, as hysteric, right?
Absolutely.
And then goes to the other extreme, but you manage to depict yourself, or that person. What was her name? Grazia.
Grazie.
Bravo,
Yanis.
Oh, I've watched it many. I've watched it many times, and I have it here in we've got the DVD. Don't worry.
Thank you.
It's one of my favorite movies. I meant that. I was not simply saying it.
He was able to do something. Every once in a while it happens. In my career, I've made 90 movies, maybe 90.
Yeah.
5, 6 times, something like this. Boom, the god of movies comes and takes you. And this is definitely one of them. And I am very proud to be in it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to say about this movie, because it's all about, we of the left have this terror in our heads, or we should have the terror in our heads, that we talk about collectivism, about the collective, about togetherness, about doing things together. But at the same time, personally, I fear the collective, because the collective is perfectly capable of being very oppressive. and being very stupid and being very cruel. In Greek villages, in Italian villages, in the in the Soviet Union, we of the left have been failed by the collective.
Of
And
course.
this movie begins with this failure of a collective, but
Yeah.
because of your son's wonderful humanity and the way he manipulates with laying the dress on the rock to make
Yeah.
everybody think you are dead.
Everybody thinking, yes, she's gone.
And then suddenly the whole village jumps into the water to having seen you, to support you and to cocoon you. And so the collective becomes worthy suddenly. It becomes a good thing.
Which is what we all I mean, it's utopistic, and we all desire that idea of collectiveness. And at the same time, I think we more and more are, how do you say, testimony of a collective that is not actually that illuminato, or that even during this crisis, there was a lot of examples to me of just intelligence and real, looking ahead, and of a lot of people. And at the same time, you saw constantly a deranged, stupid human way of looking at what's going on and not learning nothing from it. And I don't know how to explain. I mean, I'm trying. Every dramatic situation, you see all of that. And in our democracies today, you see them constantly. This collective that has been, probably it has always been. Probably in other times, I don't think this is the only time. It's just that now we can see it more. We are more aware.
Now we have created weapons of mass destruction, mass financial destruction that we didn't have in the past. Whereas, that Lampedusa little village, they were all poor. Some of them were less poor than others. There was patriarchal power. There was power, ugly power.
Ugly power.
Was not turbocharged by, weaponized, turned nuclear in the way that, the banking system now does it, the way that the great, Amazon. I look at Amazon. Think of the power of Amazon. It's 10 times any state.
Yes, I know. We're all scared.
Look, let's go back to movies. Let's not get scared, because recently you made your directorial debut. You've become a director.
I've made 2 movies in the last 6 years. Yeah, I've made the first one called Miele, and the second one called Euphoria. And so, and now I'm writing my third one. I'm trying to write my third one.
So tell us about it. This is an inevitable question. How was it moving on the other side of the camera?
So nice.
Is that because you wanted to dominate the actors and take your own back and tell them what to do instead of being told what to do? Is this a question of power?
I think no, I really don't.
Okay.
And I think a lot of directors have the question of power and can be great directors, even if they do it for that. I don't have that necessarily. The thing of power is not in my, but it's to be able to look at others instead of being looked at.
Right.
It's a liberation to begin with, where you're not anymore your theater, whatever I do for a living. And, I'm not looked at. I don't have to be this or that. I can be, abstract and take everybody else in, which is more, if you want, almost more in my nature. I am more, prone to curiosity and to constant curiosity, enchantment, and at the same time of bringing things together. This is in my nature. Then, life took me elsewhere, and I am grateful. But now that I am, in another stage of my life, of course, directing is extremely interesting for me. I love acting. I am, that's all. I know how to do that. But directing is very much my passion right now.
how do you approach actors? It helps to have been one, to be one, not to have been one, to still be an actor. But you know what? I maybe because I'm too authoritarian. I
You
would
are
not,
too authoritarian.
maybe.
Actually,
I said maybe. I didn't
actually,
confess.
today is the time that I've seen you more is because you are in this more kind of like soft and welcoming than any other time I've met you.
Because I'm talking about my favorite topic, movies,
Movies.
right? Not politics. I
Exactly.
loathe
Ah,
politics. Politics,
how?
you know, politics is something we have to do, like taking the rubbish out at night.
But you are a politician whether you like it or not to a
Yeah,
certain
and
extent.
I take the rubbish out at night. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean I want to do it. It's the same thing. It's a dirty job. Somebody's going to do it, right?
exactly. Exactly. No,
But I was going to ask you,
the actors. Each
what?
actor each actor has to be treated differently.
Hmm.
Not every actor
Do they
is
annoy you sometimes?
eh?
Do they annoy you at sometimes when they do their own
Yeah,
thing?
of course. I
Do you tell them?
uh if it's useful.
Right.
I tell them if it's useful to in that moment to get what I want. So if I think that I have to be a little bit hurtful, I will, but it's not necessarily, some actors like to work in confidence and in love. Some actors like to work in tension. Every actor is different. And
Sure.
I have so much, I am an actress and generally I try to treat actors like I want to be treated. I would like to be treated in the same way and I try that. But then each time is different. Uh, Sometimes actors, when do they annoy me? When they become an interference between my imagination and the result.
Isn't
You-
that always?
eh?
Isn't that
Sometimes though,
always?
yeah, sometimes, no, sometimes they bring presence.
Right.
There is moments where your actors will do something that you had not imagined and that is more beautiful, more poetic, more accidentally, strange. And that is like when you love them and you want to go there and kiss their hands and say, and it happens and it's beautiful. And then sometimes actors become this kind of thing where you're like, for Christ's sake, do what I'm telling you. This is not it. So it's all of it. I have been an interference with my directors and I have been also a present. So I know actors.
So, what are you writing now?
I am writing like from a book. My last movie was from an original idea. And instead this one is I got a book that a woman writer called Goliarda Sapienza, woman, wrote in the mid-70s. And it's called The Art of Joy. The Art of Joy. And it's a very, very complicated, beautiful, powerful, and at the same time, sometimes a very strange book, which is taking me almost a year to write, but very, very interesting. So if I get to do it, it could be, something. It's about 1900 in Sicily.
Okay.
So it's about a
So
woman.
your own Novecento then.
Yeah, right. Yes, let's say yes. One day they will say that it's, but no. Actually,
That
I
you
just
wrote it
saw.
in Bertolucci's house.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? I just saw Novecento first part 2 weeks ago again, and
What do you think of it?
there is some scenes that they are amazing, and some
Sure.
scenes that they are like a little bit dated, or
Mhm.
a little bit of the time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, great movies are never completely resolved, I think. You don't have to make a product that is exactly what it should be. You just need to do something that inside that there is something memorable and unforgivable,
Gettable.
unforgettable. I'm thinking more and more like that. I think that all the movies that we look up to, they're not perfect, but they are, you know, at times amazing.
Okay, which brings me to the next question.
But are you going to send me? Are you going to send me to dinner? What time is it?
We have 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes.
Okay.
We
Okay.
stick to our.
No,
we are
I love our conversation. It's just that I have to make pee. That's all.
Okay, we'll cut it short.
I love
But I
our
need to ask you one question. I need to ask you a question because as a director, you are a director, you've got to suffer the director's question.
Yes.
What movie would you have liked to have made that somebody else has already made? One movie that somebody else has made that you would have loved to have made. Maybe with your own input.
The Tree of Life.
The Tree of Life. Ah, Mr. Malik. Okay. Okay.
And it's not necessarily the only no, but if I could have made a movie in the last 10 years, yeah, I would have loved to have that kind of grace to make The Tree of Life. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good way of edging out of this fantastic conversation. What we have watched, all of us who've been watching you, is the sunset. Even though we're not looking towards the sea, we can see that the light has subsided.
And I am darker and darker.
But this is beautiful because, you know, the conversation proceeds, the sun is going away. We never see the sun, but we imagine it. So, you know, you've added the cinematographic quality to this interview simply by sitting on Bertolucci's veranda.
Yes.
Valeria, it was a great joy to be with you. And of course, you know that Danae and I are expecting you to make the crossing from Kirkis Island to Aki.
I'm waiting a bit more, and then I'm going to come. Get ready.
Well, you have a few weeks.
Yes, maybe a month. Maybe.
That's a few weeks. We're expecting you. Well, to our viewers, thank you for watching. Next week, Another Now is going to be hosting Jamie Galbraith, another dear friend, economist, weirdo like us.
Weirdo.
Only for weirdos. The best weirdos in the world are on DiEM25's Another Now. Thank you so much. Carpe diem, as we say in DiEM25.
Ciao, Yanni. Ευχαριστώ.
Ciao, Valeria. Thank you.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Τέλεια.